Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Resilience Development in Action. I'm so happy to meet Eric Robinson. You know, we meet people differently. I've said this many times on my podcast, and I met Eric through a pod match. Yes, it's not like a dating site. We were joking around about that earlier because our wives/girlfriends will not be happy about these things. So anyway, it was great to read his story, and then we exchanged, and I thought that was you'd be a great guest. But Eric Robinson, welcome to Resilience Development in Action.
Thanks, Steve. Also a pleasure on my end, too.
You know, I looked at your book and I'm like, darn, I should have read that book. I didn't get a chance to look at it yet because the story is fascinating. But I don't want to take away from you telling your story. But for me, going from, a specific job to another like yours and then retiring and being to where you're at in your spiritual life, your mental health life, your physical life is just fascinating to me. But because I read a lot more than probably most of my audience at this point about you, Eric, I probably should ask you to introduce yourself.
Sure. I am a few months retired from 24 years in the FBI. Joined in 2002, and during the years, I'll go through it real fast. I worked drug cartels, gangs, public corruption, and civil rights, organized crime, crimes against children, financial crimes, national security, and human intelligence. Along the way, did 15 years as a SWAT operator, and that was very fulfilling. Firearms and tactical instructor. Got to see quite a few things. And prior to that, I was a Baptist pastor. So I preached my last sermon in the church on Easter of 2002, just happened to be. The next Sunday, I was in Quantico, Virginia for the FBI Academy. And the Sunday after that, as they were easing me into my law enforcement career, I was preaching in the chapel in the FBI Academy because they didn't have a chaplain and asked me to fill in.
Well, there's so many things that you just said that seems to me that are very important. You know, I never know where to really start because this is always people's stories and I love their story. The first thing that came to mind is, 2002, decided to go to the FBI. I'm like, all right, sorry, 9/11 kicks in right away for me. Is that what kind of like made you decide to go into a more law enforcement type of job or something else? Or
it was something else. And as you get into mental health and resiliency, it was for my mental health. And it might seem odd to you, but pastoring the church, there were a number of factors. The shorthand answer for me is that I was incapable of separating myself from the people's problems. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing normal pastor stuff. People are coming to me saying, hey, I've got this issue and I'm working through with them, but then I would carry it on from there. So better men have been able to figure out how to not hold on to that. That wasn't me. And the result of that was the stress gave me headaches every single day for the final 2 years. And I mean, every day. And while I enjoyed what I was doing and it was fulfilling and we were successful, we're doing well, there just came to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. Yeah, I had to decide, like, either I was going to choose to make a move or inevitably my body would make that choice for me. And I didn't want to see that happen. And so I looked at a few jobs, say, well, let's just start out and see what's there. And I applied for one job that I was overqualified for, and they turned me down. And then I applied for one that I was underqualified for, and they said, yeah, sure. So to 9/11, I had studied Islam in the past. I was trained to be a missionary to Muslim cultures. That course changed a bit, and I stayed stateside and just went through pastoring. But my application was in process when 9/11 hit, and I'm presuming that my background in working with Muslims was a factor in being hired because we had an Al-Qaeda problem, and hey, this guy knows how to contact Muslims, reach out to them. So I think the Bureau took a chance on me for that. And then, of course, once I got on board, they stuck me on a drug squad.
Yeah, that's why it's funny because when you started talking, I'm like, and then he ended up being on SWAT.
Yeah, never handled a gun before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So without being too pushy, how old were you when you decided all this?
That's not pushy. I was
Well, I know you're only
32.
35, so that's why I was
Yeah, my
asking.
gosh. My shoulder is 85. Uh,
That's I'm shooting the fucking gun. That's what I
yeah.
think.
Oh my gosh. And I love having the headphones on because obviously all those days at the range, like I have found that even on podcasts when people talk, I do this because, the hearing starts to go. I was 32, 33 when I got on and then didn't join SWAT until I was 42. So it's a young man's game, but I started pretty pretty ripe running around with the younger guys.
Well, it's funny because I want to go back to a couple of things, but the one thing I would say to you is that if anything, I want my FBI people to be a little more experienced than a 22-year-old kid.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Oh yeah. It's same here. And so the Bureau, if you're going to be an agent, you have to have a bachelor's degree and then at least 3 years real world experience. And even then, I mean, kids who are 24, 25 say, "Oh, I think I'm going to try." I'm like, "Nah, man, you got to at least hit 27. Get a little bit of time in there where like you're on the front edge of adult."
Right. I mean, I go back to there's so many things I would say to that. I believe that we should be able to make we can I don't mind voting, but like making any decisions about your body or anything else shouldn't be done till at least 25 because that's when your prefrontal cortex gets fully developed. So that's where I think being in the FBI, being 25 should be a minimal requirement in
Oh yeah.
regards because I think that I remember how I was at 23, and you shouldn't give me a gun or intel for any shit. That's me.
Right. And the FBI shouldn't be teaching you how to be an adult. And so it's funny when I came in, folks were older and then they went through a period of younger and then they went through a period of, guys were at least 30 and now they're skewing younger again, trying to get more agents in.
Yeah, I think that there's a difference in generation now. People think about careers a little differently, and I don't know if it's better or worse. I don't want to judge that. I just think it's different. One of the things you talked about that, being a pastor, sorry, this is a mental health podcast too. So gotta be me. You talked about separating yourself from people's problems. It's interesting because I always thought that being a pastor, being a reverend, being a type of person that will be in charge of a congregation or whatever you want to call it, a temple or anything else like that. I thought that they would talk about, the whole boundary thing in the sense that how to like leave it at the fucking door. In mental health, they do that to us, and you learn how to do it because, I don't want to compare pastors to mental health counselors because I think they're apples to oranges, the same type of area, but not similar.
Yeah.
We got, it's funny that they never taught you guys how to kind of like leave it at the door, so to speak.
Yeah. In the church, they didn't teach us how to leave it at the fucking door. The part of it too is I was the sole pastor, so I didn't have others to interact with. That was my fault. I was fairly young and didn't realize what I needed. So here I am gutting it out, with the headaches, trying to get through. Running was the only thing that helped. That if I ran, then no headache, and then I'd have a bit of an afterglow of like, oh, okay, I'm still at peace, and then it would hit. I know it was self-imposed, but obviously there was some truth to this that as a pastor, I had to wear a mask. I had to be this person. And so that was part of why I wasn't sharing things with other people. And again, I know that was self-imposed, but it's not out of whole cloth. Like clearly there was that, at least a notion of, yeah, we need our pastor to always be right. Doesn't like to smoke cigars, doesn't like to drink bourbon, doesn't like to watch rated R movies. Okay, so now I got to hide myself. So that added to it as well.
Well, I think that that's a good point, right? Being yourself is key. One of the things that I talk about in my field is that some therapists learn that whole detachment and all that. That's what they still teach us in school. I don't know. I haven't been in school in like 20 years. Maybe they don't. But for me, because of the work I do, if anything, if I am not authentic or I'm not being myself or I kind of hide who I am screwed with this population because first responders can smell a fake from a mile away.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's where I like tell people like the worst thing that can happen is people saw who I was. And I think if that's the worst thing you could ever say, I guess I'm okay.
Yeah. And what was good for me is when I got into the FBI, obviously there's stressors there, but it didn't affect me the same. All I had to do was be a good FBI agent, do the job, and the results happened one way or the other. Disappointed maybe, but not disappointed in the same way that I'm struggling with it because that's a family breaking up. Like, and it's still going to be broken up. This is, bad guy gets away and he's in the wind. Okay, somebody will catch him. Guy's not getting indicted when he should be. Yeah, disappointing. Society will get him. He'll get caught somewhere. So it just didn't affect me as personally.
Well, it's interesting because I hear you say that. And having worked in the jail for a couple of years, worked at parole, worked at probation myself. Again, mental health only. I will not steal any valor. People know that on my podcast. It's just I've always been a mental health guy. I never worked per se in the law enforcement or first responder world. You got to deal with criminals in the underbelly of society. I'll be perfectly honest with you. When I worked in those fields, sometimes it affected me mentally. You talk about, oh, family's really affected me. FBI, not so much. So
Yeah.
what's it like to be with like these guys? And then you go like, okay, let's go home and have a cigar and a bourbon.
Yeah. So I think of it this way, like there had to be some reflection because if you have this notion of, oh my gosh, there's so many criminals, there's so much crime out in the world. It's like somebody who's a bird watcher saying, man, there's so many birds out here. Well, every day when I check in, like I'm on the computer looking for bad guys. I'm staring at bad guys. Well, I have to be aware and then realize well, that's work. That's what I'm doing for real. I have to be interacting with other people to show, oh, right. I'm not going to get so cynical to think everyone's like this that, yeah, Steve, you seem like a nice guy, but I know there's dirt on you. And so I don't trust you.
There is.
So
anyway, not for
there
this
is, but it's the kind of dirt that's okay. It's fine.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, my dad used to tell me, and we get in some discussions, and he'd say, you're very, you're in a bubble in the church. Like you don't realize what the real world is. And he was a truck driver. So he wasn't talking about criminal stuff. It's just like, hey, you're talking to people who are homogeneous. They're like you. They're from your town. They're similar ages, similar socioeconomic backgrounds. And, we would discuss that or argue. And then I get in the FBI and like always, my dad was right. I'm seeing so much different. I'm in Chicago talking to gang members who are completely different than how I grew up. I'm talking to teen prostitutes who are not like me. And, I'm talking with guys who are business managers stealing money, millionaires, but stealing more money, and they're not like me. So it was eye-opening to get into a new world and see different types of people, but then also see the commonalities of, hey, we're still human too.
Just a quick break. Guys, I'm going to talk about a new product that I really like. I actually bought one of their hoodies. It was amazing, and I really enjoyed wearing it. This episode is going to be supported by Deemed Fit. Deemed Fit is a first responder-owned activewear and leisure brand. And one thing that I genuinely like about them is that they support different causes. I actually gave a few people I know who work with first responders or nonprofits their name to Deemed Fit, and I know they're talking to them. They do a lot of initiatives and collections that are based on mental health for first responders. And if you go there right now and you buy anything, including the mental health support stuff, use the code RDA15. That's right, RDA15 to get 15% off on any products that you get. Again, it's called RDA15. Go to deemedfit.com, DEEMEDFIT.com, and enjoy 15% off at checkout to save. Now, right back to the episode. Well, you talk about interacting with those individuals on, and how they're different than us. You can't tell me you didn't hear like some stories that were also heartbreaking. I mean, when you hear about,
Oh, yeah.
You talk about teen prostitution. I know we use the name human trafficking now. It's pretty similar if you ask me. I know people will say it's slightly different. Okay, whatever. how do you deal with that? Because that to me, like that was the hard part is hearing like the victims particularly.
Yep.
Because people will be, oh, she's a prostitute. Yeah, but when you're forced into it, are you a prostitute?
Yeah. So what was often happening, and so if they're doing it on their own, then it's just them prostituting. When an adult gets involved, now it's sex trafficking. And the difference between you and me and the pimps we'd run into is here's a 16-year-old girl who's a runaway. Parents are useless, drug addicts, absent, abusive. And so she's out on her own and she's been prostituting because she needs to survive. And unlike you or me, this adult male comes by and says, I would like to exploit that. You and I would say, how can I help you? Let's get you out of this.
Right.
But they would say, here's a money making opportunity. So most times, there's always differences, but most times these pimps were coming along. They're looking for the girls so they can add them to the stable, but they're now going to exploit them further. When we would prosecute these pimps, they would so often fight against the charges because this is their mindset. And this is, again, part of that fascinating seeing humans at work. She was already doing this. Like I was doing, like I didn't force her into this. She was already having sex with men. I helped her earn more money. I drove her places. I took care of her. I gave her gifts, leaving out the manipulation, the abuse, the inherent evil of not caring for someone in trouble, but instead pushing them further into that. So we would have so many of these victims, and the prosecutors would say, yeah, she's just not a good witness. I'm like, no, 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 no. This isn't about the victim. This is about the adult carrying out the crime because she might just, like prosecutors look at it and go, yeah, but after you arrested him, she's back out on the street. I'm like, we're going after him. We're going after the
Right.
evil. We got to find some way to get some foundations in to help her. But our job is justice. We're going after him.
And going after them sometimes is very complex. Like you said, they protect themselves in the, well, I'm just helping here,
Right.
um, omitting a lot of the other stuff. You
Well,
know,
and that's like that in court, that's not going to fly. Like, go ahead and try that one. You're going to get hammered. But in their mind, hey, I don't understand why you think I'm not a trafficker. I'm not forcing it. There were some who did, but that's their mindset.
right.
And it wasn't necessarily like you and I might have that mindset in order to assuage our guilt and tamp it down for them. That's just that's just how they recollected what they're doing. Meanwhile, they were part of a group, a society, a micro society that praised this type of male behavior that said, this is how you are more of a man, how you show your strength by taking on these women.
Well, I think that think about prostitution. I also, you said you're dealing with gang members. Sometimes that gang on gang violence, some people, I've heard many people like, well, if they kill each other, that's fine. But there's also got to be a compassionate side where, they're still humans. And I know that that's not popular. And whoever's listening here is like, mental health wise, you got to understand that some people don't have a choice. Like, that's what I think the hardest part is sometimes. Like, people will choose to be in gangs.
Yeah.
It's either that or worse. And if you think about it, that's not a great choice to have.
No, and they are making a choice, but their choices are forced, they're directed and limited too. And so getting to work with the gang members, you see like there are reasons. And absolutely, I had to always see even the worst criminals as human, not monsters, humans making monstrous decisions, maybe, but see the gang members who they're poor. So this is a way to earn some money. They're threatened by the surroundings, so they need people with them. They're abandoned, so they need brotherhood. There's so many factors that play into it. And then there was glorification, so they're getting approval and finding identity in being in the gang, and that's human that they would go after that. So, yeah, here's an 18-year-old kid making poor choices, right? That's
Right.
going to happen, especially as those choices are directing them down a similar path of others.
The need for affiliation is really people don't understand how important that is. That's why we do join, you know, anything. Basically, even our jobs are part of a group. Sometimes we don't want to be there, but most of the time it's like, oh, well, I can bitch and moan with these people because they get it.
Right. We have common complaints, and that bonds us. And so living in Chicago, I was in an up and coming neighborhood, and I later learned that up and coming means it used to be worse. It's still bad, but it used to be worse. And there would always be, kids outside like fighting, tagging stuff. And I went down once. It's like 10:30. Windows are open because it's hot, and there are, kids are down there yelling. And I go down, and I got my gun on me and badge just in case. But I go down and say, "You guys got to go home. You got to shut up. You got to leave." And like, here's this 13-year-old kid who's been causing havoc. He goes, so I'm looking at him as like one more problem. And he says, what time is it? And I said, it's 10:30, man. He goes, oh my gosh, my mom's going to kill me. Would you walk me home? And that just splits from here's a gang kid, here's this nuisance, here's this object,
Right.
to, oh, this is a 13-year-old kid whose mother's going to be pissed, and he's scared of walking 2 blocks home. He sees me as a protector, as an adult, that, now he went from gang guy to 13-year-old child. And that helps then now to see this next guy who grew up in this hard land, like, yep, he probably went through similar stuff.
Well, and I think that that's important to see people for people. I think that that's one of the things that sometimes, part of what I just said earlier about when I worked in that world, I dehumanized humans a lot because I had to feel comfortable with sometimes, sending him back to jail or what have you. And I didn't make that decision, obviously, but, sometimes I had to have that armor. How do you separate that from, because now, the FBI agent came in and I'm going to fucking set the law straight. And then this 13-year-old kid is scared. And now you got to switch the script,
Yeah.
so to speak, in order to be there for that kid.
Well, for me, that was my base. That was my default setting as a person, as a pastor. And I think most people have this, to just look at people as trustworthy, as good, and then you respond to what you're seeing. You respond to how they're acting, past attitudes. And then that kid brought me back to, oh yeah, if I'm in church and there's a 13-year-old kid, it doesn't matter if he's black, white, whatever, and he says, hey, my mom's upset, can you help me? Like, now I'm going to act kindly. Here I was being influenced by my surroundings, coming down with anger and judgment. And that kid's simple thing brings me back to, oh, that's right. I'm a nice person who wants to do kind things to others, and not, look at him with disdain. And so anytime that I was getting ready to arrest or interact with a criminal, I had to go back and find what connects me to them. And so, I mean, these guys might be pedophiles, which people just look at and say, kill them. And I go, oh, no, I'm here to bring justice. So I want a confession. I don't need to tell them they're disgusting because they already believe that.
Right.
I don't need to bring shame. They're full of shame. They're just driven by forces, by pleasures that they either are unwilling or unable to control. And so now I'm coming to them. It's like, okay, one guy I'm interviewing, he's telling me how he loved the little kid that he was with and had assaulted. And I have to think, I know what that's like. Not in his context, but I know what that's like. I have kids. I love them. I have had girlfriends. I know what that's like. And so I have to now take away the judgment of, yes, but you're talking about a child half your age and doesn't, you harmed him for his life. I have to take that out.
Right.
That'll be in trial, but just now keep connecting and building with him so that we're just having a conversation. And the mind, if I'm not damning him and slamming the table and cursing him, I think the mind brings him to a place where this is just talking. This isn't an interrogation, this is a safe place where you're not being judged.
I think that going back to what you said, it really is about reminding yourself of where a person comes from. And even though we don't come sometimes from that different point of view, as nicely as I can say it, it made sense in their brain. And
Yeah.
that's the detachment sometimes that's really hard for people because people take it so personally.
Yes. And so there has to be an awareness and reflection. So I'm going in angry and disgusted because I've already been talking to the kid and the family, and I want vengeance, but that should be coming in the form of justice, which is me doing my job. Okay, let's set this right. And now I'm going to I'm going to use my energy to be that person that I am otherwise. Let's not make this a separate context. Let's make this a conversation I'm having in the break room. Let's make this conversation.
Right.
Just talking, making it safe in that moment. What's crazy is when you do those post-arrest interrogations, I have found that the criminals are set in this moment. So there's a calculus that what I say has future implications, but they're most often caught in this moment. So if this moment is, I'm not judging you, but what you tell me is going to get judged by a jury, they don't see that. And so make this safe, and that makes my hammer so much bigger. Now that's how I punch you in the mouth, by making you confess.
Well, in case you want to punch me in the mouth, maybe we should go to, if you're okay with standing for another half hour, I'd love to do a second part with you because I'd love to talk about Irreverent, your book.
Yeah.
And I will need a copy, by the way. I have not read it. So for my audience who knows I'm always honest, I haven't read it, but I can't wait to read it. But can you stay for another half hour? I think we can talk more about the FBI, talk about your book. There's plenty of things to talk about here.
Absolutely.
All right. So for those of you, this is the end of this first episode, but please join us next week for the second part of this episode, which is going to be fantastic. And I hope to see you then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.